How you feeling, man?
I'm comfortable with this. I'm good. I'm good. Just got back from playing some tennis. Got a little sweaty. Yeah.
Tennis, I feel like, was one of the first activities to be reapproved for human consumption, you know?
Yeah, it was. And so when quarantine first started, I was at the very tail end of my bus tour. We had, I think, 3 shows, technically 4 shows left. And ironically, the tour was called Dangerous Waters, right? And the 4th show that or the 4th to last show, I guess, that we were supposed to do was in Philly. And the venue got shut down because a water main broke outside the venue. So it was literally Dangerous Waters that prevented the Dangerous Waters tour from going to Philadelphia.
Right.
It was, I mean, you just can't make this shit up, man.
That's so good.
So instead of going to Philly, we went straight to Pittsburgh, had 2 days off there. And then we were supposed to do Pittsburgh, Boston, New York, last 3 shows of the tour, crush it, whatever. And obviously at this point, you know, everything was up in the air. Like we were just, you know, kind of chugging along and we're like, well, we don't know if anything is going to happen. Everything could get canceled. We might be able to squeak it out. I was supposed to go to Miami right after that. And it was like, everything was still on for Miami, but like, it seemed like there was no way it was going to happen.
Right.
And so we're in Pittsburgh. I go to sleep and it's the second day off. I go to bed and I just have this feeling like I'm going to wake up for the show tomorrow and it's not going to happen. There's no way.
Yeah.
And I wake up and they're like, hey, guess what? Everyone's going home. Everything is canceled. And so instead of flying back to LA, I flew into Orange County because Joanne, my wife, was staying at her mother's house. So I fly into Orange County. We stay at Joanne's mom's house for a couple of days. And I'm like, you know what? I haven't been home in 3 months. I want to go to LA. I want to go to my loft. I want to go to my studio, whatever. We drive up to LA, and I think within like 6 hours of being up there, I was like, yo, I do not want to be here. Like I don't want to be in a tiny loft. I don't want to have to walk my dog outside every time she has to go to the bathroom. I want her to have a yard. And so we've basically been staying in Irvine for the last, 3 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's why, you know, we've started getting into tennis because it's like, we're literally living in suburbia now. So it's like,
you gotta learn to live like the people
I'm
there.
leaning into it. You know what I mean?
Did you, so you didn't play tennis before this?
I did when I was a kid, a bit. I was much more of like a extreme sports person, you know, like I grew up, I was actually seriously into baseball when I was younger. And then I kept breaking my arms skateboarding. And my dad was like, yo, like you have to choose. Because like, I'm sick of having to put you on the bench every year because you break your arm skating. And I was like, all right, cool. Well,
oh, he was the coach?
Yeah. I was like super serious about baseball like that, you know?
What did you play?
I was a pitcher. I played second. I played third.
It's hard to be a pitcher with a broken arm.
It's hard to be in anything with a broken arm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got into my super, you know, like, you know, fuck normal stuff, rock and roll, skateboarding, punk life. And so I gave up regular sports, basically up until now. But tennis is cool because it's like me and Joanne can go and play and like, we each get better and we can feed off each other and it's something fun for us to do. And there's a court right down the street from where we're living. But yeah, it's like, I think we probably started playing tennis because there's a court right across the street. And it was, like you said, like one of the first things to open back up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense, man, because you got to get outside a bit too. Mm-hmm. And in a place like Irvine, it's probably hard to avoid people. I feel like, you know, people are packed in pretty good in Irvine. I don't know.
Yeah.
How's your mood been in general? Like, obviously having to stop your tour is shitty and not cool.
Yeah.
But, you know, just in general, how's the quarantine time been for you?
I have, and I've talked about this a lot of times on my stream with a lot of other people, because we've actually kind of started doing podcasts
I saw
things.
that. I tuned into one of them, actually. I was watching the one you did with Elenium.
Yeah, so that was the first one, because before that, it was like my radio show, and I was running that on Twitch, which I'm glad I stopped doing, especially with all the DMCA shit that's going down right now.
I know, it's getting rough out there.
But I realized that people were super engaged when I would do interviews, and then when I was playing music and it was just a visualizer, there wasn't enough going on for the fans to really feel like they were, a part of something. And I've always enjoyed talk radio more than listening to the radio,
right? Which
is weird coming from a music producer. You would think like, obviously music is our life, right?
I'm there with you, man. Like, it's the same for me. I think it's partially that there's a part of our brains, once you've been a producer long enough, that you can't turn it off. It's hard to just listen to music and enjoy it the way you used to,
Yeah.
And that's not a complaint, but it's just kind of the way it is.
It's about kind of losing that innocence in a way. You know what I mean? Like it's like, if you're a pro baseball player or a pro skater, or I'm a huge gamer, right? And I have lots of friends that are pro streamers, competitive, pro level Call of Duty players, whatever. And I'll be like, yo, like, let's play some fucking video games. And they're like, no.
Yeah.
or an even better example is like, if we go to EDC, right? And, my friends who are, Twitch streamers or pro gamers or whatever, they come to EDC and they're like, yo, come meet me at this stage and whatever. And I'm like, absolutely not. Yeah. Never. No way. And then I go to like E3 or BlizzCon or something like that. And I'll hit them up and I'm like, yo, where you at? I'm at this, stand or whatever. And they're like, yo, we left.
Yeah.
Like we literally go in, we do our job and we get the hell out of there. And I'm like, but why? It's so cool. And then I realized that's their EDC.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And when no matter how much you love something, when you do it for a job, you do lose a certain amount of that, innocence. And it's a part of life. But honestly, even before that, or I think it's probably a product of me, being a full-time music producer, but, I just like when I'm in the car, I love getting to listen to people that I respect, just have funny conversations. And I feel like I learn a lot of stuff that's going on in the world because I never fucking watched the news up until recently.
Yeah.
Now I can't turn it off.
Oh, yeah, man. I think a lot of people are having that experience right now.
Yeah. But yeah, I think there's something so special about, whether it's talk radio or podcasts that, and it's really cool to see it having this kind of, I don't know if I would call it a renaissance, but kind of having its moment, so to speak.
Yeah, it's booming for sure. I mean, you look
and
at...
props to you because you got on it, way before, like, you started doing back-to-back.
It's been over 3 years now.
Yeah. And back then it was like, if you're a DJ, why would you do a podcast?
Oh, man, you have no idea the conversations I had at the start, just trying to explain to other DJs what it was.
Yeah,
just
or to like management, I imagine.
Well, yeah, there's that too. Like now we're still a very small team, but at least I have people to, reach out to people and talk to, people we might not have direct relationships with. But yeah, even now still, we absolutely have to explain the concept.
Yeah. I don't think that'll be for much longer.
Yeah, I hope so, man. I mean, honestly, it's funny because like I saw your show and I know people like Toki Monsta and other people have been doing their own versions of, their talk show or their podcast or whatever it is. And when it first started happening, I thought I would be kind of like jealous or territorial about it. But the more it happens, I get so stoked, man, because it's
the
cool
more people,
to see.
Yeah. The more people that do it, the more of our world is going to be exposed to podcasts, and then they'll find more of them.
Exactly. And it's so like, interesting to get perspectives from other people, just to get outside of your own head and your own experience. I think especially in the music industry, especially at a high level of success, everybody kind of lives in their own little bubble, in their own little reality,
Right.
And it's cool to kind of
I like to think
break
that
into other people's bubbles.
I also like to think that I'm not very successful.
That's what you tell yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a Jew. We're self-deprecating to fail.
As am I, my brother.
Hell yeah. Shabbat Shalom. Isn't it Friday? Right?
Yeah. It's Friday, man. Are you observant at all?
Fuck no, dude.
Yeah, I'm not either.
No way. Absolutely not. But
how were you raised? Like, were you told anything about Judaism as a kid? I'm always curious.
I mean, I went to Hebrew school from, I think, like 2nd grade to 8th or 9th grade. I had a bar mitzvah. Like, okay. I went through the whole thing. I was raised as a a conservative Jew, because there's basically 3 levels of Judaism in the States. There's Reformed, which is like your Los Angeles Jew, which is like the laziest form of Judaism.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. And then there's conservative, which is, you're not Orthodox by any means, but you take things a little bit more seriously.
Right.
And then there's Orthodox, which are, the dudes you see in where is it? Fucking right next to the Grove. Hancock Park, you know what I mean?
You're talking about.
Or in like in Brooklyn. I think the best way to explain the difference between conservative and Reform Judaism is, for my bar mitzvah, I actually at my temple, which might feel a little reformed, instead of it being just my bar mitzvah, you had a bar mitzvah partner. So 2 people would kind of team up, and like you would do like half of the Haftorah, half of, all of the requirements of a bar mitzvah. Okay. So it took a lot of the pressure off, but there was still a lot of work. I want to say it was like 2 years of prep.
I mean, that's crazy. I don't know that non-Jews know how much work and prep leads up to a bar mitzvah.
Yeah. However, when I started going to my cousins who, I have a lot of family that's from Los Angeles, and we would come down for their bar and bat mitzvahs, and fucking homie would literally just sit up there and like, I don't even think they would like do like anything other than read their little essay that they wrote about what it means to, be a good person. And then that was it. And I was like, whoa, like I did how much work? And these dudes just sit here in this like the craziest temple I've ever seen in my life. Just like, where all of the Jews that they say run the music industry, like that's where they're all at. Is at these crazy ass temples in Beverly Hills.
Yeah. Well, this will tell you what kind of Jew I was. So my parents gave me the choice. They left it up to me whether or not I wanted to have a bar mitzvah, which I appreciated and still do. But in my 12, 13-year-old brain, the dilemma was, I really would like to get the presents that you get at a bar mitzvah, but I also really don't want to do the work that it takes. And in the end, my laziness won out and I didn't do it.
Yeah. You know what?
So that's what kind of Jew I am.
I had the same dilemma. It's not like they necessarily gave me a choice, but it was more like in my head, I was like, I really want to stick this out because it's going to be worth it? Or do I literally hate this so much that I just tell my parents I'm not doing this anymore? And I'm glad I stuck it out, because all of the money that accumulated from all of my Jewish relatives from all over the country that came in because of my bar mitzvah actually ended up paying for one of my first like real production computers.
Oh shit. Now that is like, amazing. That's a full circle moment.
It was like, I had like a couple grand or whatever that I had made for my bar mitzvah. And I think my parents gave me like a couple $100 to buy like a PlayStation 2 or something like that. They were like, the rest of this is for when you turn 18. And I was like, that's stupid. And then And then I think I was 18 or 19 years old, and, you know, I had dropped out of college, or maybe I was closer to 20. I had gone through Icon and, you know, whatever. And my computer was a piece of shit. And I was talking to my dad, and he was like, hey, you know, I have like all this money of yours. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't have any money. I can't even afford to like eat food. And he was like, no, dude, like you have all this bar mitzvah money that's just been sitting in a savings account, like gaining interest. And I was like, oh shit. So I was able to get myself a fancy new laptop and afford some food. And back then, coffee and cigarettes, which was, you know,
the diet.
I mean, it was my priorities were cigarettes first, then coffee, then food.
That's the order of importance. Yeah.
Yeah. Things have shifted a little bit now.
Yeah. What's the order these days?
Coffee, then food, then nicotine devices that are at least just not cigarettes anymore.
Right. You've transitioned off of that.
Yeah. I told myself when I was 23 that I was going to quit smoking cigarettes. And I made the mistake of telling Joanne that when we first started dating. Because we started dating when I was 20. Yeah. And so literally like weeks before my 23rd birthday, she was like, hey, remember that thing you told me? And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to do that. And this was before Juuls were a thing. It was before like any kind of vapes were really a thing. She was like, no, you're quitting, dude. And I was like, oh no. And I thought it was going to be impossible. But I mean, here I am, 4 years later.
Right.
Yeah.
Where are you at with it now? Are you eventually wanting to get off the Juul, or are you pretty stabilized where you're at?
I'm torn, man. Because I mean, obviously, I think if you asked Joanne that question, she would say, you know, as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Cut it to nothing. But I don't smoke weed anymore. I don't really drink ever. I don't do drugs. I don't do anything but I feel like you need to have like some vices in your life.
Sure.
If you like, or maybe not for everyone, you know what I mean? But I feel like everyone has a vice. And if you try to cut them all out, you will literally go insane.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, everybody needs a release for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's in my opinion, if you try to live so straight and narrow and do everything to, you know, make your life last as long as possible, at the end of the day, you're going to look back and be like, man, I should have just done all this stuff because, you know, it's like and this is kind of a hot button topic, but it's kind of like the guy who is vegan his entire life. And he's on his deathbed and they ask him, you know, what's the one thing you regret? And he's like, I really wish I would have had a fucking burger. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think everybody needs to feel like they are able to indulge when they want to indulge. And that release valve is definitely necessary. I think it's more, I've been talking to people a lot about this lately. I don't know why, but I think it's, you know, everybody has some bad tendency in their brain, right? Some bad habit, just something you learned, something you picked up. Maybe it comes from childhood, and it's that chemistry in our brains. And to me, it's all about sort of refocusing those tendencies on something healthier or something more productive for yourself. So, like, you know, you were saying
what a smart person would do.
I don't know, man. I mean, I was gonna try to say you are a smart person because you're talking about how you're a big gamer, right? And I'm sure that's something. I used to be a big gamer, and it was something I had control issues with, and I kind of had to take a step back. But you've been able to, you know, turn it into this, especially in quarantine, right? You're streaming more. You're kind of leaning into that tendency, but you flipped it to make it a productive part of your life and your career, right?
Exactly. And, you know, that's definitely the goal. That definitely is my quote unquote release. It always has been since I was a kid. But I would say on the streaming side, you know, I try to focus things a lot towards music at this point, just because I know that's my demographic and I know that's what people will I don't like to say it's what they expect from me, even though I mean that is. But I think it's where I have the most to offer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like there's already 400 million people playing Call of Duty on Twitch every single day. You know, some with thousands and tens of thousands of viewers, and some with 4 or 0. So it's like I try to apply the same concepts that I use in music to streaming, which is, you know, take what makes me unique, take what I have to offer that other people might not, and then capitalize on that versus trying to get in and do things that are already being done. Because if you're reinventing the wheel, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know, you were saying that I took something that I was passionate about and made it into something productive. Like I was saying before, you know, I went to film school, and, you know, ever since I was a kid, music has always been number one. But I've also been super, super passionate about, you know, film, like filming skate videos or like making edits for YouTube and that whole world. So, you know, starting to stream has really been able to like compile all of these things that I'm super passionate about. And especially while we're sitting here doing nothing with our lives, like I get to, you know, kind of take it on full steam and like put all of my effort into, you know, what might not be my number one passion, so to speak, but something that I've always, you know, like when I was going to film school, I knew I didn't want to do film for a living, which is, you know, part of the reason I dropped out.
Yeah, that's a good reason.
But, you know, my goal was always like, okay, you know, I want to do music. I've always known this. I'm going to, but at some point it'd be really cool to be like a, you know, music video producer and like take the world of music that I love so much and the world of film that I love so much and kind of combine them and direct music videos or produce them, whatever. But when I was thinking about that, Twitch didn't exist. YouTube barely existed. You know what I mean? Now there's ways to blend not just the music world and not just the film world, but also the video game internet world, and make this package of stuff that it feels exactly like who I am. You know what I mean?
That's a cool way to think about it. Yeah. And that's got to be a really great feeling too, man, to have this sort of enforced time off to really build this other component that you've been thinking about. And I think, you know, even if you're not streaming games, I think just your interest in it and the fact that you're friends with people who do that, the presentation on your streams, I mean, it's like a TV channel almost. You've got programming, specific days, specific shows. It's way more full featured than I think a lot of people's streams. Yeah,
it's because I didn't get on Twitch because, I'm not DJing right now, so I need to do something productive. Yeah. This is something I've always cared about. It's something I've always wanted to do. I was actually starting to do streams like 6 months before the whole quarantine thing happened, you know? So it's not like something that I'm just trying to navigate and figure out. It's like, it's something I've always really wanted to do. And now I have this, you know, opportunity to really like hit it on the head. So, but back to what you were just saying, which I think is important because it's a question that we never really got around to answering. I think it's what started this entire tangent. Is how I feel about this time off. This is a bit of an unpopular opinion. I've talked about it with a lot of people who are in our world, and I feel like they all share the same, you know, feelings about it. And it's maybe hard to hear and understand from a fan's perspective, but I think it's worth saying. I feel so lucky that we have this time.
Yeah.
Because for all of us, being able to hit the pause button on our careers it's never possible. You know what I mean? I can't just be like, oh, you know what? I'm not gonna tour for 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah.
The amount of people that can do that and get away with it, both financially and just as a brand, it's almost impossible. So, you know, like having our entire industry grind to a halt And then all of us just be able to be like, okay, I get to take a breath. I get to be with the people I care about. I get to do the things that I love outside of just grinding music. And like, I get to write music now, not for, I have EDC and Ultra and blah, 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 blah coming up. So I better make some bangers. I better make songs that people care about. Now I get to make music that I care about. Like kind of like back in the day when I was just figuring music out in my bedroom and just, writing music for fun and kind of trying new things and figuring it out and making mistakes and making, mistakes that you learn from, but also mistakes that lead you on a new path to something completely like different. And we just get to be creative to be creative instead of trying to force creativity into this like,
on a schedule, right?
And not even just a schedule, but is this going to generate attention? Is this going to generate revenue? Is this going to do X, Y, and Z for my brand, for my career?
Is that something I'm sure you felt that kind of pressure before this quarantine. Do you think that kind of thinking was affecting, the way you were writing music, maybe even subconsciously?
Completely. I think I think if you tell yourself that it doesn't, you're lying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, there's no two ways around it. If you are making money, either whether it's a little bit or, barely any or a ton or anywhere in the middle, if you are depending on music to survive, then that is going to influence the music that you're writing. It's just, there's no two ways around it. You know what I mean? I think the difference is there are people who can pull themselves out of those moments and figure out how to navigate it better. I feel like I have moments where I'm really good at that. And I feel like I have moments where I'm really bad at that.
Sure.
And for me, I guess, it's not necessarily that I'll sit down to write a song and be like, oh, well, I should write a song that sounds like this because that's what, is popular right now, or that's what my fans expect of me. It's more like I'll sit down and be creative and start doing whatever I want because it's fun. And then at a certain point, I'll stop myself and be like, no one's going to give a shit about this. What is this going to do for me? And then I'll go move on to the next thing. So it's not necessarily stopping me from being creative initially, but it's more like dictating, like, maybe I have a really cool idea that, could be something that it feels really fresh, but I stop myself before I get there because I'm like, oh, I'm going to put this out. No one's going to care. They're going to be like, oh, cool. You're like, hopping on to some other thing that, someone else has done already.
So it colors your perception of your own work.
Yeah. And it's a really shitty thing to have to navigate. But I mean, I'm also not going to complain because I get to do what I love for a living.
Of course, man. And everybody's figuring it out in real time. Even the biggest artists, once you talk to, the superstars of the world, they don't know what they're doing either.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing that frustrates me the most, but also gives me the most hope, is that the ones that kill it the absolute hardest are literally just doing whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah.
But then the problem is, I'll use myself as a case study, right? Not that I'm some, massive superstar or whatever, but I've seen what I'm, explaining happen on a smaller scale because of myself.
Yeah.
Right?
I think by the end of this podcast, I'm going to try to convince you that you're successful. That's my goal.
Okay. Things could be worse. I will say that.
Yeah.
But they could always be better. And I think having that, never being satisfied, always being hungry, that's part of the reason that, you're allowed to be, or you're able to be successful.
100%.
We can talk. I'm gonna try to try to not get too sidetracked here. I'm really bad at that.
I'm the worst, man.
So when I started the Jauz project, right, I had graduated from Icon. I was always a super, super heavy, dubstep like guy. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to make music like Excision and Skrillex and Must Die and, those, and I would just replicate them. Right. Like carbon copy.
Oh, sure.
And I wondered why I hated everything I made or no one cared about it. And then finally, after going through Icon and, kind of learning how to be a creative, I already had the technical tools, but I was hindering my actual creativity by trying to put myself in a box that I thought I wanted to be in. You know what I mean?
So that's an interesting point. You think going to Icon and going to music school, as opposed to giving you the tools to make music, it was actually more about changing the way you were thinking about making music?
So I talk about this a lot with Icon because I don't think, and maybe now it's more of a well-known thing, but that was, to me, the quote unquote secret of Icon that was changing kids' lives. It wasn't, that you go there and they teach you how to make Skrillex basses and all of a sudden you're a production wizard. They teach you the fundamentals of everything. And, it was up to you to take those fundamentals and build upon it and continue teaching yourself. But the one class that really, was something that, would be very difficult to teach yourself is the class is called The Art of Flow at Icon. It's very similar to the concept of, there's like a term, law of attraction. There it is. So before I went to Icon, I had read books like Think and Grow Rich and saw the movie The Secret, not read the book. But a lot of it talks about the art or the law of attraction, which is, and this is funny because, we've both acknowledged that we're Jewish.
Yeah.
To me, I'm much more of a believer as far as a religious thing goes in the law of attraction than any other actual religion.
Sure.
The core concept, to make it as basic as possible, is you put thoughts out into the universe. And as long as you keep those thoughts going, eventually they're going to swing back around and come back to you.
I was talking to Sammy, LS Dream, about that. He's big into that.
Yep, 100%. I think a lot of people that are successful use some form of it. So anyways, we won't get too sidetracked on that. But if you haven't yet, anyone who's listening right now, please watch the movie or read the book, The Secret. There's tons of things that are labeled quote unquote self-help that get a bad rap that I think are incredibly self-helpful for people. You would be surprised how many people you look up to that have, put a lot of time and effort into learning those things. So the Art of Flow at Icon is very similar in nature to something like the law of attraction, but it's more about understanding how to utilize that kind of thinking as a creative person. And it really helped me break out of that box of okay, I want to be a dubstep DJ. All I want to make is heavy bangers. And I was like, maybe that's not, what my end goal really is. Maybe that's what I've just convinced myself of. But why am I, hindering myself and not allowing myself the opportunity to discover new kinds of music and be oh, maybe I'm much better at making something else, which ironically is exactly what happened.
Right.
So, fast forward a little bit, I'm out of Icon. I'm working on music. I've started the Jauz project, and my whole goal is I'm going to make all different kinds of dance music, whether it's heavy, melodic, happy, sad, angry, whatever. I was going to do everything under the sun and just go for it. And then as a factor of that, I started making house music for the first time. And, I had roommates that were super into, real deep house and techno, tech house, whatever. I started listening to a lot of people that they were influenced by. I started listening to, AC Slater and Chris Lorenzo and all of these people. I was like, okay, cool. These are dubstep sounds, but they're in house music. I should give this a shot.
Yeah.
And once I started writing music like that is kind of when everything changed. So now we're getting back to the point that I was talking about, right?
Yep.
I was in no way, shape, or form trying to write something to be successful, right? I was just digging around on the couch with my friends. And for whatever reason, those were the songs that got really popular. And then the problem with that is, certain record labels that have a very, large stronghold in dance music started, forcing that down people's throats, where they were like, oh, the Feel the Volume, Rock the Parties of the world, that's going to be the next hot thing. And then all of a sudden, every single music producer started coming out with shit that sounded exactly like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, now on the flip side, being me, I see people, and even outside of the dance world, like Post Malone, Billie Eilish, people like that are doing something so fucking different that, or Marshmello would be a great example.
Sure.
And then, you talk to major labels, or you talk to management, you talk to, and I'm not just talking about my management, but, management as a general term. You talk to people that are on the business side of dance music, and they're like, well, this is what's popping right now. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But those people weren't trying to do that at the beginning. They just did what was natural for them, and it felt fresh, and it was at the right time. So people jumped on it.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Happens every time, man.
Yeah. So that's why I get frustrated, but I also get really hopeful, because it's like, it's tough to be in a world, and again, not just dance music, but music as a whole, where, it feels like, you're just trudging through the mud, and then all of a sudden someone just goes from, down here all the way up to the top just because they were being themselves. And then all of a sudden the entire industry shifts and gravitates towards that. And that's all they want to hear, and that's all they want to do. But it also gives me a lot of hope, because it means if you don't listen to what the industry dictates and you just do exactly what the fuck you want to do, maybe it won't be as you won't always be going up, but you're never going to completely lose yourself. And eventually you're going to be the one doing something that's so different than everyone else that everyone wants to be a part of.
Absolutely,
you know what I mean?
Man. Yeah. And I try to explain this to people too, because obviously not every single person who just follows the beat of their own drum is going to be the biggest success in the world. But what following the beat of your own drum gives you is that you end up being known for just being you,
Yeah.
That's the best way, kind of the only way to be really identifiable as an artist, because authenticity is the only thing. I mean, you just talked about how every time somebody sort of comes out of nowhere with a new idea, that the whole industry shifts and runs to follow it, right? And I think that's because those authentic moments, maybe sadly, are very rare in our industry, right? So much time and so much money is put into trying to sort of copy what's already working, as opposed to developing new ideas,
Yeah. I don't think that people who are really unique in doing their own thing are so few and far between. But the problem is people are so, not just picky, but, they have such short attention spans and whatever. So finding that right balance of you're doing your own weird shit, but also making it appealing to people who don't understand what you're doing, and also doing it at the right time, where for whatever reason, just based on luck, what you're doing is what people need to hear at that moment. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like using myself as an example again, I just wrote songs like Feel the Volume and just put them out. And I was like, I don't know, maybe it'll work. And for whatever reason, that's what dance music needed at that given moment. If I had put it out 6 months before, 6 months after, maybe no one would have gave a shit at all. Right. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of, in my opinion, intangible factors that are out of your control.
Well, I mean, timing is huge for sure, but we could almost take the reverse of your situation if you look at Bauer and Harlem Shake, right? Yeah. Which is a record he made that just he released it and it sat there for about a year. And then all of a sudden it was the right time and it happened to be rediscovered. There was a bunch of crazy circumstances around that too, but it's almost like he predicted the future, a year before it happened, he knew what was cool to him. And then the rest of the world ended up finding out. I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I want to add to it though, that I get really frustrated with the industry at large, because I think the true independence, the true free thinkers, whatever you want to call them, the people who are really just doing whatever they want to do and not worrying about how it fits in or how it's interpreted. I don't think there's a lot of support systems in our industry for people like that. I think it can feel very exclusionary and very much just like, unless you conform to a certain mold, that there's no way that it's going to get out there, which I think can be really discouraging. I mean, not to sort of bring it into the modern day, but I've been thinking about this a lot because of all the Black Lives Matters protests. And then in our own industry, there's so much talk about how Black people and minority voices just don't have the place and the stature that they should in our industry. And DJ Slink just did, I don't know if you saw, he just did this interview with Billboard that was talking about how he just, has always been a representative of club culture and Jersey Club, and how, he sort of pioneered it along with a lot of other people. And then he always saw other people sort of reaping the benefits of it as opposed to himself, right? And I think there's like a rawness to the original music, the original source, right? Like original Jersey Club doesn't really sound exactly like the Jersey Club that you hear on the main stage of an EDM festival, right?
Not even close.
And that's the thing. It's that frustrates me because I get it, but at the same time, it's like there have to be spaces created. And I'm just using Slink as a current example, but for any kind of person who has an original idea, I get frustrated.
I have so many ideas. Or so many things that come to mind, like Dave Nada and Moonbaton. Yeah, you know what I mean. Or I was just reading a thing about David Heartbreak and Munchie.
So much of the originators are people of color, right?
Well, what
does mainstream culture do, right? We take it and we make it a little whiter, and then everybody kind of hops on board. And
and that's not just dance music. That's hip hop. No. That's it. In my opinion, again,
rock and roll, man.
I feel very, very strongly about all of this. So, in my opinion, everything about our culture derives from Black culture. Everything. Yeah. I don't think there's a single thing that we haven't appropriated from Black culture. And that was my point, is that
all the cool shit, at least.
Exactly.
Do you have any ideas? And I'm still developing my thinking about this too, but how do we support the people who should be supported?
I actually had like a 4-hour conversation with one of my really good friends the other day. I was saying we need to do X, Y, and Z. The analogy that I used was that if you imagine the last 400 years, you had a scale in your house. And, on the left side is white people and on the right side is Black people. Every single year for 400 years, you've been putting a penny on the white side and you haven't put a single penny on the Black side. And then, 200 years, 250 years, let's say 200 years into that, you start putting 1 penny on the Black side, but then every time you put 1, you're putting 3 on the white side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, even though you're starting to help, the scales are still so incredibly imbalanced. And at this point, I feel like our world has progressed a lot. So it's like the scales aren't completely shifted like this, but there's still, there's a significant gap.
Right.
And, a lot of people are saying, well, equality is equality, equity is equity. Like if everyone wants to be treated, the same, then we should treat them the same. And we shouldn't be giving them, preferential, treatment as far as college admissions and jobs and whatever. And it's like that we're not there yet. You know what I mean?
We don't live in an equal society, man.
Yeah.
That's just a fact.
To create, and this is my whole opinion, and it applies to music and it applies to everything outside of music. To create real equity, we're going to have something that happens or multiple things that happen that create unequity, but not in favor of us. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Okay. So I love that you said that, because it's really funny you said. I was just listening to a podcast where they were talking about this idea, right? The reason, I think the core reason why people are so resistant to any of this, to things like reforming the police, to things like affirmative action, because deep down they know that it means change, right?
And not just change, but it means things get a little bit harder for you as a white person.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh, I'm so sorry for you that things have to be a little bit harder. Maybe now you'll have some tiny fraction of an iota of a percentage of an understanding of how it is to be a black person in this country.
Yeah. Oh,
and you still won't. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Like 100%, man.
Yeah.
I'll say one more thing, and then we can kind of transition to talk about, because I still want to talk more about you. I still got to convince you you're successful. But
yeah, and I love how we were both like, oh yeah, we shouldn't be using this time to talk, and then here we are.
Well, but yeah, man,
it's important.
It's
important.
all I've been looking at, man. It's like it's hard to think about anything else. Yeah. It's sad, but I think it's been a wake-up moment for a lot of people in the dance music world. Because if you just look at it from an objective perspective, if anyone is able to sort of break out of their own little bubble and just look at it, it's like, oh, there's obviously a problem here. Like there's very obviously a diversity problem here, but it's just been the way it's been. It's just been the way it is for so long that it's easy for people to just feel comfortable and be like, oh, well, no, this is just how it works, which is kind of just complacent thinking. Yeah.
And then,
and I'm not saying I was never like that, by the way. I don't want to make it seem like I'm better than anybody. I mean, I've been in this industry for a long time, and certainly I could have done better too.
I mean, yeah, we all could have, but it's like when you are a part of this community and you're just happy to be a part of it and be successful, it's like those things aren't going through your head because we haven't in our lifetimes had a moment like this.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate to grow up in a city, in a community that was very progressive and very forward thinking and very inclusive and proactive in tons of things. But I also grew up in a community where there weren't that many black kids around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think the difference is that we grew up in an area where people acknowledged that those things were problems. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And it was like, look, we live in this nice area. Not that I grew up, fucking rich as fuck or anything, but I grew up very comfortably, and I had lots of great opportunities. Yeah, and there's a community right down the street that's predominantly black people, and actually a lot of Brazilians.
Mm.
I had a lot of Brazilian friends growing up who lived in this same area,
Northern California.
Yeah. So I grew up in Marin, so right on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge, right? So our high school had both kids from, where I grew up around Mill Valley and Sausalito and whatever, but it also had kids from Marin City, which was, it's not fair to call it the hood because it's not the hood at all, but it was I'm sure still is an area that's very heavily populated by the black community and communities of immigrants, whether they're Portuguese, Brazilian, Latino, whatever it is. And, those kids went to the same high school as me. I went to public school, but their communities didn't have the same infrastructure as us. They don't have the same opportunities. They don't have the same, comforts that we did. But the difference is that I understood that, and I knew that, and I knew that it was a fucking problem because of where I grew up.
Mm.
And it was like, there's not a lot of places that are like that. You know what I mean? It's like, I could have totally grown up in a place where it's like you live in safe white suburbia. And then there's, the scary hood down the street where, all the people of color live, and you grow up and you think that's the norm, and you think, oh my God, I could never go over there.
Because I talk about this on the show a lot for myself, that I think it was music that actually opened me up and opened my mind up to other cultures and to people
Completely.
who had different circumstances than me, because I was somewhat similar. I grew up solidly middle class. People who listen to the show have heard this before, but we were comfortable, same as you were saying. I went to a private high school. It was mostly white kids. And had I not, sort of bucked the path I was on a little bit and gone into music, then I don't know really how diverse or how interesting my life would have been,
Yep. I completely agree. And I think maybe, finally we're at a point in our country where we have enough access to information. And if you want it bad enough, or not even bad enough, but if you just want to open your mind, it is so easy to. You know what I mean? There's such a wealth of information, whether it's on the internet or on Netflix or Hulu or whatever. So many documentaries, so many articles, so many, YouTube videos, whatever. You can get such a wealth of information, really expand your understanding of what it, means to actually be accepting of people. And I think that paired with the fact that no one is working right now, paired with the fact that this horrible thing happened, in my head, to answer your original question from so long ago, I don't think that there's any way that things don't change. Maybe it's not going to be a full 180 degree turn that we really need, but I think at least the dominoes are going to start falling.
Yeah. I mean, culturally, I think you're right. There's a feeling that it has to. We're already seeing, small changes on the local level, which is great.
And that's where it starts. And that is what the domino effect or the snowball effect is. These little things start happening and it picks up momentum and it picks up speed. And I mean, I have very high hopes that, we'll look back on 2020 in 10 years and be like, yeah, that was the start of everything.
I hope so too, man. Yeah, I've been seeing other people saying this recently too. So this is not an original idea that I'm saying right now, but I think I just want to set people's minds up to realize that it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and change is sort of a commitment that you have to keep making time and time again. And I hope from our little community that we can just do that, and that people get worried about their brand, or, if I start talking about political issues, how are people going to perceive the music and all that? And I think that,
I hope that
I think that worry's just done. I don't think that can exist anymore.
I sure fucking hope so. Cause I don't know where the fuck those kids grew up, but they obviously never listened to fucking like Rage Against the Machine or System of a Down or fucking NWA or Public Enemy. Like, where the fuck were you? What hole did you grow up in where you assume that music and politics and fucking, all that stuff isn't inherently tied to one another?
Yeah. 100%. And then, logically, if we accept that as the fact that it is, then it makes a lot of sense that you should expect to see the artists that you follow talking about these issues, right? Yeah. And that's what I want to put out there. I want to put it out there for the listeners who listen to these artists, that this is something you should expect and embrace happening, but also for the artists and the aspiring artists out there, that this is something that not only can you talk about, you should talk about, Yeah,
because that's the problem, is that so many people do mute their voices because they don't want their brands impacted.
Yeah.
And,
that makes
it harder.
I think that's done, man.
I sure hope so, because up until now, it makes it real hard for someone like me who likes to be vocal about things and use my platform to affect change. It made it real hard for me to be able to give a shit about anything, because then it's like, you're a brand, you know what I mean? Like, there are people of all different walks of life that, like your music, and you're going to alienate some of them. And it's like, okay, then they shouldn't be my fucking fan, dude. Like, there are differences, you know what I mean? Like, if you're a Republican and I'm a Democrat, if you're conservative and I'm more liberal, we can agree to disagree. You can be my fan, whatever. That's cool. But there are certain lines that I draw in the sand.
Of course.
And you know, this is obviously one that everyone should be drawing in the sand. You know what I mean? Like, who the fuck is out there that's like, I shouldn't say anything about this because all my fucking racist ass fans are going to stop paying for tickets to my show. Like, then you're a fucking racist too, dude.
Well, yeah, if you're just looking at the dollar signs of it, 100%, then you are saying that, you know, money is more important than equality, basically.
Yeah.
You know, talking about the idea of a brand and being a brand. And you talked about earlier when you put out Feel the Volume, which is, you know, the song that really blew you up into the next level of what your career was going to be, that at the time, right, it was just you fucking around. You didn't have any idea about it. And then this happens, right? And all of a sudden, people are starting to copy that kind of sound. Or, you know, you see the industry wanting more of that kind of sound. And the brand of Jauz is forming in those moments, right? Of what people think it sounds like or what people think it looks like. And I wanted to ask you, you know, the experience of that, having a hit that was something you just made because you wanted to make it in that creative space that we were talking about, must feel amazing. But then I have to imagine what happens afterwards when people kind of can't let it go and can't let things evolve. That also seems like it must be a frustrating moment.
Yes. So obvious, like the mantra of Jauz as a brand, the motto was always music has no boundaries, right? Yeah. And I was always putting out music that sounded so different from, you know, every release was like a polar, you know, like a complete 180 degree turn from one another. I'd put out a dubstep song. I'd put out a very mellow, melodic, chill, future-based song. I'd put out a mid-tempo, like, you know, not the mid-tempo that we know today, but like, you know, like a almost twerky new jack swing kind of record. And then I'd put out, you know, a house record, and then I put out a trap record, and then I would do all of these different things. But then once, you know, the Feel the Volumes and the Rock the Parties and whatever started coming out, a huge influx of fans came in who didn't know any of that.
Right.
So I think as much as I went like this, and again, this was always my goal, I never wanted to go straight up like this. You know what I mean? Because that just means that you're going to hit the top of the bell and you're going to go straight down.
Yeah.
I would much rather take little steps every now and then, continually, gradually going. So what happened was I had this huge spike. And then instead of trying to capitalize on it too hard, I just kept doing what I was doing and kept on putting out music at a really rapid pace. But I wasn't trying to make everything sound like that. So instead of going like way up, it was kind of like really big spike and then like, okay, a little bit flat up, a little bit up, a little bit up. So it like, it reset to that like gradual build, but had that like, you know, really big spike at the beginning, which I think is the best way it could have worked out. Because now I've, you know, been doing this for however long, and I've established myself as someone, because no one fucking gives a shit about bass house anymore. You know what I mean? And this is something I'll touch on that you were talking about before, which is, you know, the whole, you know, originator, blah, blah, blah effect. Yeah. And also that it would be frustrating to see people replicating what I've done. That didn't bother me at all. Because for every person that tries to make something that sounds like me, that attention is going to come back to me anyways, because they're going to be like, oh, that sounds like a Jauz song.
Right.
And then when there are people that are so good at it, kind of what I was talking about, taking a concept that's raw and refining it and making it incredible and making it that package that is so strong, that didn't bother me either, because that just meant that I didn't have to keep focusing on that shit and I could go off and do other, you know, whatever I wanted. You know, you look at someone like Joyride, you look at someone like Habstract. There's a lot of people that, you know, came into it a little bit after I did and took the same concepts that I was using and exponentially, in my opinion, increased the production value and really like drove it home. And like, I think that Habby and Johnny are way better at making music than I am.
Yeah, I think they're way better than a lot of people.
Yeah. And, that doesn't bother me at all. If someone, put up a post on a forum and was like, who do you think is the best bass house artist? And I wasn't in the top 3, that doesn't bother me at all.
Right.
Because I don't see myself as a bass house artist. You know what I mean?
I mean, is it weird to you that there is even the concept of a Jauz sound? If people say, oh, this sounds like a Jauz song.
Yes. That was something that I was trying to avoid my entire career. But now it's been enough time that I think that when people say that it sounds like a Jauz song, it's what I actually set out for it to be, which is that innately you listen to a song and it doesn't matter what genre it is. It doesn't matter what tempo it is. There's something about it that makes you understand that it's one of my songs.
Yeah.
That's what I always wanted the Jauz sound to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's people understanding and connecting more with just your brain and the way you think about music, right? Like I think about your label, Bite This, which you've been running that for what, 3-4 years now?
Let's call it. It's like closer to 3.
Okay, yeah, something like that. And that, I think, also the releases that you put out there, which, it's not even your music, you're putting out other people's music, but it's still filtered through your lens and your brain of what you think sounds cool, right? And so to me, that's almost another way that people can come into your world, see how you think about music. And
the funny thing is, though, about the label, because if you're listening to back and you're a music producer, which I'm sure there are a lot of people that watch or listen to your podcast that are music producers, it would only be fair to say, and you are thinking about sending in music to my label, please do not send me bass house music. I cannot tell you how many demos I get that are like, oh, I'm sure Jauz would like this. And it's like, cookie cutter bass house song number 34. I sign things that are so far away from that because if you're watching my Twitch stream and I'm doing demo roulette on Mondays where I go through people's songs, I do not every time I get to a song that's like a bass house song, I have to pause and preface to the chat. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah.
Just so you know, if you send me a song that sounds like this, it better be fucking incredible because otherwise I'm going to tear it to shreds. You send me something that sounds like nothing that I make, I'm probably going to love it. Or at least be like, this is a really cool idea. If you send me something that sounds like you were listening to my music while you were making it, you're going to be in for a rough awakening. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Are you pretty honest about your feedback on those? Yeah.
Yeah. But the difference is when it's like a blatant bass house, cookie cutter, whatever, the tone in my voice gets a little bit more stern. You know what I mean? Where if it's something that maybe it's not even produced that well, but the ideas are fresh and it's something that feels new and creative, I'm like, yo, this is a really cool idea. And you are onto something cool and here's how you can, take some steps to make yourself better. Whereas, a lot of the bass house stuff that I get, it's produced well and kids in the stream a lot of times are like, yo, this is super tight. And I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah. Trust me on this, kids.
They're like, wait, what do you mean? And I'm like, okay, you listening to this right now, objectively, you think it's cool, but do you think I would ever play this in my sets? Do you think that Gassy would ever play it? Do you think that Joyride would ever play it? You're entering a field that's already so competitive, that's already at such a high threshold.
Yep.
There's no point. And there's no way that it feels organic. Because
that's the key, right? Because I think it's absolutely possible to make a cool bass house song in 2020 that everybody's going to love.
I put out lots of them on the label.
Exactly.
Don't get me wrong. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's all about the intention, right? So if it's, I mean, you already said this in a different form, I think, but yeah, basically, if you're just trying to make something that sounds like the music you're into, you kind of already lost the battle, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And you're actually, you're actually tearing into the session files of these songs you're listening to, right?
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah, we do MP3 days sometimes, and we do projects sometimes.
Yeah.
It really depends on, how much time I have, how many songs I want to get through. Because when we do Ableton projects, I only can do like 2
right
before I'm like burnt. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
Of course, man.
Meanwhile, with MP3s, you can listen to like 400 in a stream, and it's just like, you can keep them going.
Yeah, of course. But no, that's cool. You do that, man, and that's like every Monday, basically. People submit music.
I actually haven't been streaming because of everything that's going on right now. Yeah. I'm currently working on setting up charity streams for next week.
Nice.
That won't be my normal, what I usually do. Every Monday I do demo roulette, which is, going through either Ableton projects or MP3s. Wednesdays are more often than not my music day, where I work on my own music, or like I'll work with a vocalist. Like my next single that's coming out, it's a song with Karra that, if you watch my stream, you already have heard it, because I literally Karra sent me a vocal that we were going to work on a song together. And we did a Zoom call just like this. And I shared my screen, and I was working on Ableton while she was in there, and she got to give me feedback. And like, that's what I do on Wednesdays, is like, I'll work, with a vocalist or another producer or something on a song together, or I'll start something from scratch.
Right.
And then Thursdays is what used to be the radio show and is now my podcast, where, I do basically the same thing that you do. So
yeah, I mean,
just listen to back. Don't worry about my podcast.
I appreciate that, and I'll take all of your listeners happily. But I think yours is different. I mean, at least the one I watched, I felt like the tone of it was super interesting and super engaging.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying at the beginning, you have your own take, I have my own take. So we can do kind of the same thing. And it's just like music, as long as you do something that is unique and original or organic to yourself.
Yes.
Everyone can do kind of the same thing, but in their own way, and everyone can have their own lane, which is something that I feel very strongly about in music. And I think it applies to not just podcasts, but anything in the world. If you're doing something that you believe in your own way, and you're not trying to bite anyone, which is why my label is called Bite This, by the way, you can find success.
Right.
And on that note, I feel like I need to jump, because I was supposed to do an interview with the Wall Street Journal 40 minutes ago.
Adam,
sorry,
WSJ.
Adam just texted me, and he's like, yo, did you get on at 2:00? And I was like, no, me and Willy have been talking for a while. Like, it's cool. And he's like, the Wall Street Journal, Sam. The Wall Street Journal. And
amazing.
I was like,
I'm sorry I kept you from that.
I just talk a lot.
No, dude, I love talking to you, man. I think we could keep going for a long time, and there was so much I wanted to talk to you about we didn't get to. So,
well, you know what? Down, how about this? We'll do an episode of In the Tank with Willy Joy.
Let's do it, man. I'd love that.
Yeah.
I'm down anytime. Yeah, I love that. Well, go talk to the Wall Street Journal. You got the new single. Is there anything else you want to tell people about before we get out of here?
There's a lot of new music coming. I don't really want to say too much about anything, but there's a lot to be excited about. Kind of like what we were talking about before, about how hitting the pause button on the music industry has allowed us time to be creative. I think that there is kind of a new Jauz that's going to be, showing its face in the next couple of releases, and it'll be easy to see. And I'm really excited, because it's a lot of it is my favorite music I've ever written. So I hope that, coming out of this shitty situation, a whole new era of Jauz is born in a good way.
That's what I like to hear, man. I hope people follow that example. And yeah, this is great, man. I like talking to you. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely, man. It was a pleasure.
Perfect.
Thanks, bro.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Bye.
Later.
All right, that's the show. Shout out to Jauz. Great to have you on the show, man. For everybody out there listening, I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed that very much. Don't forget, Jauz' new single with Karra is called Wildlife. It is out right now. Jauz is streaming multiple days of the week on Twitch. There's a link in the description of this episode where you can go keep up with everything he's doing. And you can keep up with me as well at Willy Joy or at BackToBackPod on all social media. BackToBackPod@gmail.com is the email address. And you can also find the link in the description for the Back to Back Discord server. And I want you to join up. I want you to come say hi. I will say hi back. I'm in there all the time. I hope everybody out there is doing well. I hope you're doing all right. You know, I talk about how crazy this quarantine is all the time. I do realize that some people are not quarantining quite as much as I am. I know things are reopening. If you are participating, please be safe. You gotta wear a mask. This is not a political issue. It is just plain stupid to not wear a mask. Wear your mask, wash your hands, social distancing. Everything still applies. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people around you. I love you, and I will talk to you next week. For Back to Back, this is Willy Joy. Peace.